Hey everybody, welcome to my channel, What a Ghoul Wants. For those who don't know, my name's Anna, and today we're going to be talking about all of my watches for January. If you've been following my channel, you'll know that I've been doing these kind of sporadically. I think the last one I did was for September, and I don't know why, I just kind of see how I feel about the month and about the movies that I watched, and sometimes it's just that I didn't watch that many movies, or it's just ones that I don't really care to talk about. So I'm sorry for the inconsistency with these, but I just figured, hey, I watched quite a few in January, so I'll go ahead and do a video for January. So for this, I'm just going to go through my Letterboxd and kind of go over the different reviews for the movies that I watched in January. And if you want to follow me on Letterboxd, that is linked down in the description of this video. I'd love to be friends on there and just see what everybody posts, what reviews they leave, all the different movies everyone's watching, so please feel free to follow me on there. I'm going to start with the things I watched earlier in the month and then work my way up to the most recent watches. So the first movie I watched in January was In the Earth from 2021. I've really been trying to catch up with the movies that I missed from last year. I'm actually going to be a part of the 2022 Oscars, which is put on by my very good friend Kylie of Haunted Hippie on YouTube. If you aren't following her already, please go subscribe to her. She has amazing content. But last year she did an Oscars, which is Oscars for horror movies, since horror movies seem to get jilted a lot at the Oscars. So she decided to put together the Oscars to honor all of the great work being done in the horror movies that are being put out today. And I was so happy to have her ask me to present one of the categories. So for that, I'm trying to catch up with 2021 movies. And it's a little hard because the release dates are really weird from the past couple of years. Some of the movies were filmed all the way back in maybe 2019 or 2020, but weren't released until 2021. So it's a little bit wonky with the release dates, but I'm slowly but surely catching up with those. This is a movie that I watched specifically to prep for the Oscars, and I gotta say, I was really impressed by it. I gave it 4 stars on Letterboxd, and I just said this movie was an experience. And it's actually the first Ben Wheatley movie that I've seen, and I know that a lot of his movies have pretty trippy qualities to them, and this one definitely stays in line with that. So I haven't seen A Field in England or Kill List. Those two have been on my watch list for a while, and I really want to watch his version of Rebecca, which was released, I think, in 2020. So yeah, I just am really behind on Ben Wheatley's filmography, but I'm so glad that I watched In the Earth because it was such an interesting and new take on folk horror, and it tied it in with science and technology in a way that I feel is so different. Plus, it's very prescient with all the references to COVID and things like that. So it's one that's a little bit out there, and I could definitely see it not being everybody's thing. But as far as originality goes, I really enjoyed it. And of course, just the imagery and the cinematography was so cool. And the sound design, sound plays a big part in the narrative. So this is one that I really wish I had surround sound while watching it, and one that would have been really cool to see in theaters because of the really cool effects and the sound effects used and everything like that. So I would definitely recommend watching this one, and it really does make me want to watch more of Ben Wheatley's movies. Next is Censor from 2021. Now this is a movie that I was actually pretty excited to watch, and I kind of had high hopes for because just the premise of having the main character be a censor for the film industry in the 80s when the video nasties were a huge thing. I just really like that concept. It's so cool to get kind of the insight of someone who would have worked for the film censorship industry at the time, and also having that person be connected in a way to a video nasty director. Yeah, just a super interesting concept. So I was really excited for this one. And I think it started out really strong. I really identified with our main character. I thought the lead actress was great. I'm gonna butcher her name, but Nima Algar? Nima Algar? Yeah, sorry if I'm saying that wrong, but yeah, she did a fantastic job. I just think that the way that the third act played out and the way that it ended, I don't know. I just don't know how I feel about it. I think maybe if I went back and watched it knowing what I know about the ending, possibly I could have a different viewing experience and maybe like it even more. But for me, it just kind of didn't really resolve the way I thought it would, or in a satisfying way. It just kind of left me wanting more. So for that reason, I gave it 3.5 stars, but I would totally recommend still watching it. I think all of the nostalgia and the references we get for that era of horror is really cool, and the fake video nasty movies that they made up for the film. Just those things were really well done. It was just something about the plot, something about the story, and especially the ending that I just wish it had ended with a little bit more resolution. So this is one that I will definitely revisit and go in with the mindset knowing how it ends, and I will see if that results in me liking it a bit more than the first time watch, but yeah, I'll just have to see. Next is The Strangers Pray at Night from 2018. This movie was a lot of fun. I liked it in the sense that I had a fun time watching it, and, you know, it's one of those that you can kind of just throw on. There's not a super deep plot. We know the strangers, you know, their whole thing is home invasion and stalking and ultimately killing the people that are in the movie, so we know everything we need to know going in because it's the same people from the first one, the same strangers coming and wreaking havoc on a family, and I am actually not the biggest fan of the original. I think that one is definitely a slow burn and you have to be patient with it, and I don't know, for me it just kind of bores me a little bit. The lead actors, Liv Tyler and Scott Speedman, I couldn't latch on to them. I couldn't latch on to their characters, and I honestly just didn't really care that much about them. So in this one, we do get the setup of the family and we kind of get to know them and their personalities, but again, I didn't care a ton about them. I thought they were fine. And I thought the kills were pretty good. The one standout scene for me is the one that everyone talks about, and that's the pool scene. That one was super well done. And I think if more of the movie had been a little bit more like that scene, just in the pacing and the execution, I think I would have liked it even more. There were some moments that I thought were a little bit cheesy. Leave us alone!
But we've just started.
And the way that the strangers were getting pretty hurt and kept going, it was very Michael Myers-esque, and, you know, they're just regular people, so I thought that that was an interesting take, and I really do think that overall they tried to do a much faster paced and more of a traditional slasher style movie as opposed to the first one that was a lot more, you know, home invasion, kind of on the slower side, but yeah, overall, I just gave it 2.5 stars because I felt like it was kind of right in the middle, but definitely a fun watch, definitely one I would go back to, so yep, just kind of middle of the road with this one. But again, if you're gonna watch it, I would say watch it for the pool scene. I think it's worth it just for that scene. Next up is another 2021 movie, and that is Seance. In my Letterboxd review, I said that this movie checked a lot of boxes for me. It's in a boarding school setting, which I think can be super interesting when we have a bunch of teenagers just in one living space, the place where they're at all the time, where they eat, sleep, go to school, everything. I just think it's very interesting, and the culture of boarding schools lends itself really well to having a cast of characters in a horror movie where we've got a pretty diverse set of people, and we really get to know the building really well. There's something about boarding school movies that really appeals to me. We've also got paranormal elements, which you can tell by the title, Seance. I am kind of a sucker for a paranormal movie. And then we also have a creepy masked killer, which you usually can't go wrong with that in a horror movie. So all of those things I really enjoyed about the film. It was just the execution and the story. It seemed a little bit, not contrived, but very familiar to the point where I do wish that they had done something a little bit more original. I mean, I did like the pairing of kind of a slasher with a supernatural story, which obviously has been done before, but I thought they carried it off pretty well. It just really felt like the post-Scream slashers of the late 90s, especially in the reveal of the killers. I'm not going to give anything away here, but it just really reminded me a lot of movies like Urban Legend and I Still Know What You Did Last Summer. So some people might really love that, some people might hate that if you don't like those kinds of movies. But I just thought that some of the character development was a little thin and some of the plot elements just didn't really make sense or needed a little bit more fleshing out. So for those reasons, I gave it 3 stars. This is definitely one that's not going to appeal to everyone, but I would say if you do like supernatural slashers and you like those late 90s horror movies, then go ahead and give it a watch. Next up is Scream from 2022. This is actually the first movie I've seen in theaters since Candyman from last year. So I was really, really excited to see this. I mean, I was already excited to see it because it was a Scream film, but also because I hadn't been in the theater for several months. So those two things combined, I was just really, really pumped to see this movie. And I actually saw it by myself, which that is the first time I've ever seen a movie in a theater by myself. And honestly, I had a great time. You know, I just chilled, hung out. There were only like, I don't know, maybe 10 people total in the theater. I went to see a matinee, so I was expecting there to not be many people in the theater, which is totally fine by me. That's more arm space for me. I could put my coat in the seat beside me and just kind of relax even more. So although it would have been cool to see it in a packed theater and have everyone really reacting to what was happening, I was still happy to see it the way I did. And I gave it 4 stars and a heart. I had so much fun with this movie. Yes, it wasn't perfect, but I think that they really paid a good homage to the original, obviously, but just the franchise as a whole. It really felt like it fit the tone and the style of the whole franchise, so I was really pleased with that. And of course, I loved seeing Nev and Courtney and David back. Speaking specifically of David Arquette as Dewey, he's not my favorite, I gotta say. I mean, he's alright. There are some of the movies in the franchise where he does kind of get on my nerves a little bit, but I think this movie was his best performance as Dewey, and I really cared about him, and the way that they played his and Gail's relationship just really got to me. I don't know what it was. So props to David Arquette. I think he did a really good job. And of course, Courtney and Nev just totally killed it. They absolutely get their characters so well. They know them so intimately. I mean, this is their 5th movie as these characters, and they just have them down pat, and I loved their banter in this one, the way that they really banded together. It was so good. And our new cast I liked pretty well. There were some people that I thought were maybe not as fleshed out or we could have done without. I'm talking specifically about Liv. I just thought she was okay. But I loved the twins, me being a fraternal twin as well. I have a twin brother, so I just really loved Chad and Mindy. They really stood out in the new cast for me, especially Mindy, of course. She was our new Randy, so of course every horror movie nerd is gonna love her. And just all the little Easter eggs referring to other movies in the franchise, like the little post-it note on the fridge in Deputy Judy's house that said lemon squares in the fridge.
Your lemon squares taste like ass.
And the little soundbite of Gail in her morning show referring to her bangs in Scream 3. Those kinds of things were so fun. And I'm not going to go into spoilers or anything like that, but yeah, I just think they paid really good homage to the franchise. And everybody's been saying how brutal the Ghostface kills are in this one, and I would have to agree. The kills are pretty intense as far as Scream standards go, and the opening scene is really well done. I am really excited to rewatch this one knowing who the killers are, so I am wondering how that will change my thoughts on the movie, but yeah, overall, really happy with it. Just really enjoyed it. This is definitely one that I would say go see it in theaters if you can. Next is Wrong Turn from 2021. Wow, this movie really took me by surprise. So I've only seen the original Wrong Turn from, is it 2003? I haven't seen any other movies in the franchise, so that is really the only basis for my knowledge about the Wrong Turn franchise. I went into this one with really no expectations, but even then, with no expectations, it managed to really surprise me. And a lot of people complain about it not feeling like a Wrong Turn movie. I don't really know. Again, like I said, I have no connection to the franchise, so I was okay with the way the story went, and it really did go into some territory that I was not expecting. So again, not going to spoil anything, but it did feel a little bit like the first half and the second half were a bit disjointed and didn't fit together quite as well or flow into each other as well as I would have liked. But those things aside, I did enjoy it, and I gave it 3.5 stars because there were some things I thought could be improved to make it a bit more cohesive, but it was still really fun, and I will absolutely go back to this, and I will watch some more movies in the Wrong Turn franchise, although I have heard some pretty bad things about the later entries, so yeah, I'll just have to see. So yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by this one. Next is The Last Matinee from 2020. This is another one that again surprised me. I went in not knowing anything about it. I just saw that it was on Shudder, so I went ahead and watched it, and it really reminded me of Giallo. It was a really cool homage to Giallo movies with the black glove killer, and I loved that they had it in a movie theater. I thought that was pretty meta, and we get some shots in the theater of the movie posters on the walls, and one of them is Opera, the Argento movie, which is also in a different kind of theater, but I just thought that was a really cool little homage to the Giallo genre, and yeah, this one was just a ton of fun. I will say, if you get really grossed out by eyeball trauma in movies, I would probably avoid this one. There is a scene that is pretty hard to watch and just really grossed me out. But if you can get past that, or maybe just close your eyes during that part, I would say please watch this movie. It was a fun ride. And and having the main character be a projectionist in a movie theater was just really cool to see. So I gave it 3.5 stars because it's not going to rock your world with originality or anything like that, but it is a really fun, just love letter to 80s slashers, and having it set in a movie theater was just so fun. So this is a good one if you're just having a fun movie night with some friends, throw it on and just enjoy the ride. Next is Superhost from 2021. This is one that a lot of people I had heard talk about and say that they liked it, and so I was like, all right, I'll give it a try. And I don't know, there was something about it. It was maybe the characters I couldn't really latch onto, which is weird because the main characters are YouTubers who review different Airbnbs. So having them be content creators and have them worry about their subscribers and all of that, I could definitely relate to. But I don't know, there was just something about it where I just couldn't relate to the characters on a personal level, just with their personalities. And I thought that our main villain was just really odd and off-putting right off the bat. So there really wasn't much room for her to progressively get crazier. I don't know. I mean, she does definitely pop off towards the end, but there was just something about it, the way that it played out. I don't know. I just couldn't really get into it. So for that reason, I gave it 3 stars. Yeah, maybe I just need to rewatch it and give it another shot, but I don't know. Just something about it. It just really wasn't my thing. Next is Soul Survivors from 2001. This is a movie that I went into kind of expecting it to be pretty bad. I mainly watched it because it stars Eliza Dushku, who I just love her. She's awesome, and I'll watch anything with her in it once to give it a shot. And yeah, this one was pretty bad. It was just like I expected. I guess it's kind of like a supernatural slasher. It's very confusing. The plot was very hard to follow. It was really trying to be very heady and make you wonder if our main character is in their right mind or if they're going crazy or what. I don't know. It was trying to do too much, and it just ended up being a confused mess and just pretty subpar overall. So for that reason, I gave it 2 stars. I wouldn't even say watch it for Eliza Dushku. I mean, she's gorgeous in it, and she is absolutely the best part of the film, but yeah, I would say you guys can skip this one for sure. Next is The Vigil from 2019. This movie focuses on a man who is leaving the Orthodox Jewish community, but he's called back by a rabbi to hold vigil over someone who's died. I had not heard of this tradition before, but it's very interesting. So someone will pray over the person's dead body overnight so that it can kind of shepherd their soul and protect their soul as it leaves their body. I believe that's what it's about. So just that premise alone is super interesting, and the characters speak Yiddish to each other in the film, which is really cool to see in a movie. I hadn't seen that in a horror film before. So I love that we're getting that representation. And the atmosphere was very good, very creepy. It's just this guy in this house watching over this dead body at night. Yeah, all of those elements worked for me. It was just the way that some of the scenes played out, and there are kind of a lot of horror movie tropes in this film, I would say. Like, we get a lot of, oh, this thing happened, but did it really? Is it all in his mind? There's, creepy shadowy figures and things like that. And I do think they worked in the context of the movie, but there were some things that just kind of irked me, like the sound design, having really loud noises every time something scary happened, and there was a lot of bone cracking. It was just a little bit too much for me. It happened a little too much. If they had kind of pared that down and had it go with the more understated and subtle type of horror, I would have liked that a lot more. So for those reasons, I gave it 3.5 stars. But again, this is another one that I think is worth the watch. And I just really want to see more Jewish horror. I'm sure there's some out there, and I just have to seek it out. But I think in general, it would be really cool to just get more horror that focuses on Jewish culture, because I think we have just an overabundance of Christian and Catholic themed horror, so I would really love to see more Jewish horror in general. Next is V or Vi, I'm not exactly sure how to say it, from 1967. This is one that I've been wanting to watch for quite a while because I see stills for it all the time. Mostly they're of the ghost witch lady who is pretty much the star of the movie. And it's a Soviet-era film about this monastery student who basically kills a witch, and then she comes back and takes revenge on him when he has to come and pray over her dead body, which this kind of of fits in with Vigil. I didn't really think about it, but it's a pretty similar premise where we've got this corpse laying around and someone has to pray over it through the night. And for this one, it's actually 3 nights that this priest has to stay and hold vigil over this corpse. So there is a lot of just the priest traveling to where he has to go, and a lot of those scenes kind of drag, but I mean, for the time period, I can totally understand why they included them in the film. But by today's standards of, faster paced filmmaking, it just kind of drug on a little bit more. And I was like, I just want to get to the witch part. But the last 20 minutes or so is what I was really expecting of the film, where we have the witch coming to life and tormenting this guy and summoning all of these demons. And the special effects for the time look really, really good. I think it holds up really well. And the color of the film is gorgeous. The style of our witch is really cool with her flower crown and her flowy white robe gown thing. So all of that I loved about the film. So I gave it 3.5 stars and a heart, and my Letterboxd description I just said, "This movie really resonates with me because I too wish to be a beautiful witch who wears a flower crown, flies around in a coffin, and curses men who deserve it." So this is one that I probably won't revisit very often, and if I do, I'll probably just skip towards the end because it really is the best part. But it's definitely a beautiful piece of cinema that is just from a really cool time period and setting and really has some good folk horror vibes to it. So again, another one that I would definitely recommend watching. Okay, next is, I've kind of been dreading getting to this one because I might make some people mad with my opinions, but next up is Halloween Kills from, of course, 2021. And I gave this movie 2.5 stars. I know that it's pretty polarizing, so I'm definitely not in the minority of people who just didn't really like it, but I am just not a big Halloween fan in general. Not to say that I'm biased against Halloween movies. I don't love them. They're not my favorite by any means. I didn't grow up with them, and Michael he's not my favorite. So all of that being said, it doesn't make me dislike the franchise, but I just don't have like an affinity towards it. So I don't know, maybe that did color my viewing a little bit, but this movie just really, really felt like filler. It felt like a lot of stretched out time, a lot of just in-between movie that's gonna connect Halloween to Halloween Ends. So yeah, I mean, the kills were fine, they were okay. It just came across as really campy to me. There were times where I was literally laughing at people being killed in the movie, which I don't know if that's what they were going for, because the film really seemed to take itself seriously, but a lot of things just felt like parody, like the repetitiveness and people saying, of course, we've heard it a million times, but evil dies tonight, just over and over again. And a lot of characters just felt very one note. Anthony Michael Hall's character, evil dies tonight! I don't know, I didn't really care about all the people that were getting killed. And I just wish that we had Jamie Lee Curtis doing more. I wish we had more time with the characters that we actually care about, with Judy Greer and, gosh, I can't even remember the granddaughter's name. I don't know her character name. I'm blanking on that right now. So, see, I just wish that we had gotten more time with them as opposed to characters that we just met in this movie and then got killed off. Like, I don't know. And that last sequence where Michael, he gets back up off the ground and starts killing people, everything's in slow motion. It was just funny to me. I don't know. Guys, am I alone in this? Did anybody else laugh at Halloween Kills? Come at me if you will. If you love this movie, I'm sorry. And I know that there are definitely people who liked it, but it just wasn't for me. It really wasn't. So yeah, that's why I gave it 2.5 stars. I guess we'll see how Halloween ends this part of the franchise, but I just have to say my hopes are not very high. Definitely let me know in the comments how you feel about it. All right, and the last movie that I watched in January was Frozen from 2010. This is another one that really surprised me, and it's one that I've seen the poster for a lot, but not really many people talking about it. I actually saw one of my friends post about it in their story on Instagram and say that they really thought that it was good and was an underrated movie. So I was like, well, I'll give it a try. Plus, it's been really cold here, so I thought it would be a good setting to watch a movie called Frozen. So it's basically about these college friends who get stranded on a ski lift and have to try to figure out how to survive. So the premise alone was really interesting. We do get some kind of cringy early 2000s dialogue, which it's kind of just a product of the time. And there were some special effects that I thought weren't great. There were some that were really good. And then there were others that didn't come off very well. So it was a little bit of a mixed bag. I mean, overall, in general, I thought that the way it was shot and the effects were pretty good. There were just some that kind of stuck out as being subpar to me. So for those reasons, I gave it 3.5 stars, but I did give it a heart because I really did enjoy it. I thought that the time that we got with the characters was well spent. We really got to know them and care about them, and just the tension built throughout. I thought that it did a really good job of sustaining the suspense and making us really feel for the people that were in this situation and root for them and make them want to survive. So yeah, absolutely, this is one that I think is slept on, and I think that more people should watch. And I think I'll be adding it to my wintertime watches and go back to it every winter. So definitely glad that I finally watched this one. And finally, I have to talk about Yellow Jackets, the TV series. Letterboxd doesn't allow for reviewing TV series, but I still definitely wanted to talk about this one because it was so good. If it were on Letterboxd, I would have given it 5 stars and a heart. I've just not seen a TV series that I have been this invested in and this enthralled by and impressed by. I think it's really interesting how they jockey between present day and the past, where they have this plane crash as teenagers. The soccer team gets stranded in the woods in the 90s and they have to figure out how to survive. Very Lord of the Flies, Heart of Darkness-esque, which is always a really interesting premise. Just having a group of people stranded and having a hierarchy develop, that in and of itself is very interesting. Plus, having it be a girls' soccer team. I was a soccer player in high school. It was my sport, and just seeing a really good representation of teenage girls is always nice to see. It's always good to see them well written and compelling and people that I could really identify with. I just really love all the characters that we're introduced to. We get enough backstory for each of them. I think it's pretty equitable. Of course, there are a couple that there is more focus on, but there isn't really a character that I dislike. I mean, there are some that are unlikable in the context of the narrative, but I think that they are all compelling in their own way. Plus, when we get the current day actresses, of course, I love seeing Christina Ricci and Juliette Lewis. They do a fantastic job. As do Melanie Lynskey and Tawny Cypress. They absolutely kill it. And after every episode, I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? And I thought the season ender was great. Just everything about this. We get some hints at folk horror, which I think it seems like season 2 is going to have an even heavier kind of folk horror feel to it. So I'm just really excited to see where they go with season 2. I actually got the Showtime free trial. It's only 7 days, but I got it specifically to watch this TV series and I binged it in that week. And I would say it's pretty easy to do that because you just want to keep watching it. So if you don't have Showtime, just do the free trial and binge it. It's absolutely worth it. So yeah, that is everything that I watched in January. Pretty good variety. A lot of stuff from 2021 in order to gear up for the Oscars. But yeah, I'm just super excited to see what I watch in February. Of course, I'll be watching the stuff on my 14 Days of Heartbreak horror list. I have a video up for that if you want to check that out. And if you want to follow along with that challenge, that would be awesome. I love making these themed watch lists. It's so fun for me. So check that out if you haven't already. And I'll have all of my social media and all that stuff linked in the description if you want to follow me on Letterboxd or Instagram or anything like that. So that's going to do it for today, everyone. Again, thank you so much for watching. I totally appreciate it. And if you like this, please like the video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I love just hanging out with you on here, talking about horror movies. What could be better? Thanks again for watching, and we'll talk horror next time.